Welcome to Resonance Radio, Keith Whitten.
Thank you, Thomas.
The universe is alive. What does that mean to you?
What does it mean to me? I think it changes everything. I think if people realize that and realize that not just the universe, the solar system, galaxies, everything is alive and literally alive, living. It has the qualities of a living being.
What do you mean? What are these qualities that a living being has that the universe also has?
Well, living beings, they grow, they evolve, they learn, they have memory, and they're capable of interacting with each other. And so it means that the universe is learning, it's growing, and it has goals. And we are part of it. We have the opportunity to interact with that living universe as another living being and grow together.
So you said it has memory, has the ability to learn, and we're a part of it. So, I mean, is it alive because there are living beings, living entities, animals, and humans, which have consciousness and are able to remember, and therefore the universe has memory? Or are you saying that the universe has memory beyond just the memory of the creatures that live in it?
Well, a little bit of both. I mean, it has memory beyond the creatures living in it, is the short answer to that. And it's like, you have to define memory, of course. And I guess my definition of memory is that you have a situation without memory would be chaotic. Memory is what allows something to do something over and over again and to change and grow from it. So I believe that there's memory in space and time. Space-time is memory, and I mean that not just metaphorically. I think that the vacuum of space, which is space-time, actually has the quality of memory, that it retains the memory of its past. And when you talk about, here we are, we're entities that we know are alive. We're by definition alive within this universe. Most people, they don't think of the universe as being alive. They think of it as this inanimate background. And we just happen to be this anomaly that showed up somehow and is interacting with this non-living background. And that to me is impossible. It's where do we stop? We don't stop anywhere. Our skin, do we stop at the skin? We're breathing in the atmosphere of the earth into our lungs and exhaling out of it. And it's a fractal. Fractals don't have boundaries. There's fractal scaling at all the different scales up to the universe. And specifically in my book, I talk about how the solar system is alive. And I think it's a lot easier to appreciate how the universe might be alive if you work your way up from human aliveness through the solar system is alive. And when you can see how the solar system is alive, then it's very easy to speculate about how a galaxy could be alive and how the universe could be alive. So that's where I bring in the idea of chakras, and the earth is the heart chakra, and how it mimics and provides the form and functionality for our heart, lungs, and digestive system.
I want to go back a little bit because you were talking about memory, and where my mind went was remote viewing and people's experience of what they think is our past lives or memories of past lives. stepping aside from whether it was their own past life or someone else's past life, stepping away from ownership or like individual egoic continuity between multiple lives, but just this, I think my impression is it's been pretty documented of people having memories of previous lives that have been able to be validated.
Yep.
Like a kid gets born and then he has a memory of where he put the thing in the other life, and then they go there and they find the thing where he had the memory of
the Dalai Lama.
Yeah, stuff like or the Dalai Lama. So is that an example of how it's more the universe is having the memory rather than just the individual creatures having their own separate memories?
Yeah, memory is. This is one thing that we've learned from biology and anatomy is that they've never been able to find a location in the brain where a memory is stored. The brain is an indexer. It indexes memories, but where are the memories? The memories are out there in space. They're in the environment, and it's like moments of space-time are stacked one on top of another, according to some people. It's like they're not, events are whole, and it's like that is the memory, that the wholeness of space-time out to the universe. Now, it's like I believe that specifically the magnetospheres and electromagnetism is how we are interacting with our environment. Specifically inside of our brain as an indexing machine to index and recall memories in context. But you're then accessing that memory just the same way that you access anything else. Your brain is more of a radio receiver. It's receiving this information from the environment. And where does the environment end? I mean, certainly it's easier to get access to closer memories. But even you can have memories all the way out to the universe. I believe that we have memories back to maybe the beginning of the universe, if there was a beginning, right? And it's like I once asked you, how old are you, right? And you told me, how old are you? You're 60 or something, right? 50, 49, or whatever you are. Uh-huh. And I said, no, you're not 49 years old. You're 13.8 billion years and 49 years old. We're all that age. We are the universe. And it's not just, we're these things within the universe. We are that universe. You can't separate us out from the universe.
Hmm. So you went on to talking about it's maybe easier to understand that by starting with the solar system and then moving out and the planets. So what do you mean by that?
Well, I wrote a book called Meta Gaia, and the whole premise there is that Gaia has been around for a long time, but Gaia, as understood by science, which was introduced by James Lovelock, is this idea that the Earth has a biosphere on the surface of it, and that somehow it equates to a living organism. It's not quite that simple, but and Gaia has, it's never really caught on with society. A lot of people consider it to be a failed hypothesis, and to an extent it is. But I believe that the problem with Gaia as it's currently constructed is that it doesn't go far enough. And the reason why is if you look at the Earth has a predominantly plant-based biosphere. In other words, I think it's 83% of the biomass of the biosphere is made up of plants. And then another 16% is made up of soil organisms, bacteria and viruses and mushrooms and all the other stuff. 16% plus 83, that's 99%. And it's actually animals, including insects and mammals, make up less than 0.5% of the biomass of the biosphere. And of course, so in other words, 99% is plants. The soil bacteria is what makes plants possible. Plants are photosynthetic, right? And so you can't just say that the earth is alive. The earth without the sun doesn't exist. Once again, you can't, where do you draw lines? It's like us humans, we stop at the skin. No, we don't. The earth, it stops at the biosphere, which is this tiny thin covering on the surface of the earth. No, you have to at least take it out to the sun. And what you also find out is that the moon is also incredibly important to the biosphere. The tides, the churning of the water, and it's not just the water, it's the land also, making soil. So if you then include, the sun and the earth, you can also, sun, earth, and moon, you can also speculate that maybe the other planets are also somehow contributing to the living qualities of this planetary biosphere. And what I show in my book is I talk about how the sun is what I call the crown chakra. It corresponds to the brain of the solar system. And the earth is the heart chakra. And the moon is orbiting the earth, equivalent to the breath. And you have plants growing on the surface of the earth. And the sun above is illuminating the earth, and only half of it is illuminated. And that half, so you've got a light half of earth and a dark half of earth below that. It's called the circle of illumination, which is always perpendicular to the line between the sun and the earth. And if you study biology, plant biology, you find out that there's something called photosynthesis, which has light and dark phases. And the light phase of photosynthesis corresponds to the lungs, and the dark half corresponds, the dark phase of photosynthesis corresponds to the digestive system. And I go into detail about this in my book about how the light phase is where light from the sun illuminates these plants, and it activates the light phase, which generates ATP. And ATP is then used in the dark phase to grow plant material out of plants. Extract carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and assemble that carbon dioxide into plant material, sugars and these starches which build up the plants. And so that's the equivalent of that is in a human body or an animal body. You've got the lungs, which take in the oxygen generated by the light half of photosynthesis. They take that in and they use that to generate ATP through a similar process. And then the blood, the charged blood is then distributed to the rest of the body, including the digestive system, which then builds the body just like plants build their body. So that's a quick metaphorical overview, but you can go into much greater detail and see these correspondences across scale. And so my theory is that the Earth, through its magnetosphere, is generating what I call a morphogenetic field, which extends out. I mean, the Earth's magnetosphere is they say that it extends out about 5 Earth diameters, and it depends on where you stop. But we're immersed in this magnetosphere, and that magnetosphere is, if it is a morphogenetic field, it means that you've got not just the Earth's magnetosphere, but all the other magnetospheres. They extend out to infinity in a certain sense. And so they generate a complex electromagnetic field. I call it the magnetoform. And that magnetoform is like a hologramic pattern, which then sets up the chakras of the other planets, which also have magnetospheres or the remains of magnetospheres, which then lay out the chakra system in a body. You have a modular organization of the body to reflect the modular organization of the solar system.
And are there, if there is a correspondence there, I would imagine that there are some kind of characteristics that are corollary between each of those organs and those planets, like specifically, like what is, okay. So like, what are some examples of that?
Some examples of that are, well, one of the more obvious ones that I've been able to work out, and this is Jupiter would correspond to the adrenal gland, basically. And so that chakra is called the solar plexus, right? The solar plexus is a chakra, and solar refers to the sun. And if you look at the structure of Jupiter, Jupiter is a gas giant, and it's actually almost close enough in size that if it were a little bit more massive, it would actually collapse and turn into a sun.
Wow.
This is one of the ideas. And it has a very extensive satellite system. So it's like a little tiny solar system within the solar system. And so I'm saying that it corresponds to the adrenal gland, which has an adrenal medulla and an adrenal cortex. And the cortex, the outer layer, would correspond to the satellite system, whereas the inner layer, the adrenal medulla, would correspond to the planet itself, to Jupiter itself. And they do different things. You know, the outer layer is divided into 3 layers, and there's 3 different types of hormones that are secreted in those different layers. One is epinephrine and aldosterone and the sex hormones, and they do radically different things. And if you look at Jupiter, you find that their satellite systems are also divided into 3 distinct types of satellites.
Oh.
You've got the inner satellites, which are the largest, and they're orbiting in the close to the equatorial plane, basically. And then you've got another set of satellites that are outside of that orbit also in the equatorial plane, and then another set that orbits at an oblique angle to the equatorial plane of that planet. And there are 3 distinct sets of planets corresponding to the 3 layers of the adrenal cortex. And did I say epinephrine? Anyway, so the inner layer, the adrenal medulla, corresponds to, it's actually made up of nerve tissue. It's a medulla. It's what all the endocrine organs correspond to the chakras in a certain sense. So this is an endocrine organ, but nerve tissue, similar to the brain is the sun. So the nerve tissue of this thing is the equivalent to the gaseous giant that is the planet that could become a sun if it was a little bit larger. It's similar to a sun,
Mm-hmm.
sort of. So that's one of the correspondences
Mm-hmm.
that exist across scale.
So where my mind goes is we have an asteroid belt, and one of the theories is that used to be a planet, but just recently there was an observation of a big giant chunk of something in the asteroid belt, and what really jumped out at me was the hypothesis, or the idea that it's so big it seems like it must have been like part of the core of a planet or something, which to me confirms this theory that used to be a planet. And there's, legendary stories of there having been a planet. Tiamat is one of its names. I think there are a few other names.
Yeah, it fits with the Bodhi's law, right? Which predicted that there should be something at that particular distance.
Okay, and there is a large amount of mass there. It's just broken up into a bunch of. So
Right.
if that had been a planet at some point, I'm curious about what organ would correlate with that position, and is there a characteristic that correlates with a planet that used to be there but is no longer there?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I've thought about that, and I haven't been able to figure that out, honestly. But it brings up an interesting point, because we were talking about memory earlier, right? Mm-hmm. And see, I'm saying that the memory of the solar system is in our human bodies also. Mm-hmm. And if you look at what's interesting is that the two planets on either side of the Earth, Venus and Mars, do not have what's called intrinsic magnetospheres. Mm. They have what's called an induced magnetosphere. But it's speculated, and we now know that for Mars in particular, we've been able to determine that at one time it did have a magnetosphere that you can, sample the rocks and you can see where they were aligned. And so if you then look at what are the corresponding organs in the human body, which I think correspond to those two planets, one is the thymus. The thymus would correspond to the Venus, and the spleen would correspond to Mars. And what's interesting about those is that both of those organs, they're useful very early in life. They're not just useful, they're necessary to build the body. But then later in life, they can actually be removed. They're no longer essential. You can live without a spleen, and you can actually, after a certain age, you can live without your thymus also. And so what I see is that there's recapitulation going on. I call it recapitulation is the idea that in your embryonic development that we go through a particular set of stages that reflect the evolutionary process. And I'm saying that there's cosmic recapitulation. In other words, as the solar system is evolving, as I said earlier, one of the qualities of a living solar system is that it evolves and grows. And I believe that humans and other animals have had a parallel development. So as the solar system has gone through its stages, we have also gone through similar stages. So the thymus at one time, probably up until Venus lost its magnetosphere, was a more essential organ, and who knows what that would have looked like in our bodies. Same with the spleen. And what came first? I'm just convinced that we are the solar system. It's like to say that we are existing and growing apart from the solar system doesn't make sense. We can't exist apart from the solar system. And so I believe that the solar system is learning from us and we're learning from it, and it's this back and forth dynamic that goes on, and we're continually growing and evolving. And in other words, if we're looking for life on other planets, right? And we're looking for Earth-like planets, but I believe that to find something equivalent to what we live in, you would need to look for a solar system, not just an Earth surrounding a star at the particular distance, which allows for a three-phase hydrosphere. You need a modular organization to permit the growth of bodies and the sustenance of bodies like our own.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah, it's radical. It's
Have you talked to is it Rupert Sheldrake who has the morpho, what does he call it? Morphic resonance?
Morphic resonance, yeah.
Yeah. So when you say morphogenetic field, is that what you called it?
Yeah, morphogenetic field, yeah.
Is that the same as what he's talking about with morphic resonance?
No, it's not actually. Morphogenesis has been around. It was brought up early in the 19th century or 20th century, and it was brought into the idea before they found DNA. Basically, they couldn't think of how bodies could grow without some field effect providing like a pattern, right? And so this was invoked as an idea, a morphogenetic field. But then once DNA was discovered, the complexity of DNA at one point was thought, okay, maybe we can get rid of this morphogenetic field. But then they realized that no, you still can't get rid of the morphogenetic field. So, but it's different from a morphic field. The morphic field, as proposed by Sheldrake, as far as I can understand it, it's not. There's when you have a field, you have to, for it to be at all scientific, you have to speculate. Well, what is the nature of that field, right? You can't just call it this abstract field. So what is it? Is it an electromagnetic field? See, I believe that the morphogenetic field is the magnetospheres, all of the magnetospheres of all the planets together creating this dense informational field, which exists everywhere within the solar system. And you're on the surface of the Earth at a particular location, and you have access to that from a hologramic perspective.
Right, because we're more than our bodies, and we have our own electromagnetic field, which, according to scientific ideas around, like, there is no boundary zone between one magnetic field and another magnetic field. So theoretically, they're to some degree interacting. And so what we are is this field that's interacting with all the other fields in one big field, big collective field. And it's okay. So the interaction between all of these planetary electromagnetic fields is so where there's kind of like this continual interaction. I mean, I'm imagining, the double slit experiment where you have overlapping waves that then create patterns and cancellation, multiplication. You have all these different sources of waves and information. Like the information is almost contained within the interaction between all these different fields.
I mean, if you look at the magnetosphere of the Earth, it's incredibly complex. You got the Van Allen radiation belts. What is all that stuff doing, right? What is the nature of it? Why is it there, other than just it's very convenient that it's acting as a bow field to deflect cosmic radiation, right? Otherwise we'd be in trouble. But other planets have that don't have life on it. It's doing more than just that. It's the memory of the solar system. It's the memory of that planet, is what I believe it is. DNA is memory also. So the DNA is a resonant molecule. See, this is another thing that to really understand my theory of a living solar system and how the magnetospheres interact, you have to bring in the idea that the organ in the body, which is interacting with the magnetosphere of the planet, is the bloodstream, right? The bloodstream is a vastly misunderstood organ, in my opinion, right? I propose, and this was based on a guy that I read, Peter Plichta. He talked about how the blood is made up of you've got hemoglobin, which is the carrier for oxygen. It's got these 4 ring molecules called heme rings. And if you look at a heme ring, it's made up of carbon and hydrogen, and then at the middle there's 4 nitrogen atoms form in a square, which then hold a single iron atom at the center of this thing. And what he speculates, and what's clear to me now, is that that's actually a coil structure. You've got a free electron that's circulating around that thing, around the heme ring.
Mm-hmm.
The iron molecule at the center, it's like a motor. In a motor, you've got an iron bar at the center of the ring to magnify the force of the field.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got jillions of these heme molecules as little. They're emanating a magnetic field,
mm-hmm.
and they're all aligned. I would imagine that in the blood, they're all aligned so that they fit, one next to the other, and they're flowing through the blood, creating this vast electromagnetic flowing informational gathering machine. It's like, just because we're not magnetic in the sense that we attract iron or something like this. I mean, we do have attract iron. We have all this iron in us, right? But we're not polarized magnetically. Like the human body, there's, it's not specifically a magnetic, but that doesn't mean that it's not generating an electromagnetic field, which is communicating with other electromagnetic morphogenetic fields. The blood is what's allowing for that communication, and it's the pattern of the bloodstream is equivalent to the pattern of the magnetoform of the solar system. It's like, if you look at you've got the sun at the top here, right? And then you've got all these planets aligned below it in a chakra alignment. Then the planets are, if you have the sun like this, and then the magnetospheres are going like a caduceus, right? So they're all linked together in a flow. And the magnetoform is just like in your blood. You've got blood that flows. We think of it as the heart, but it's flowing back and forth between basically the brain and all the way down to the bottom of your body, right? And blood flows into a endocrine organ, and then it flows out, and then it continues to flow. It's like the planets gather the electromagnetic forces and then disperse them again, just like the planets. You have to use your physiological imagination to see it. But once you see it, it's very clear that this is a pattern, and it's a modular pattern, just like, there's the equivalent number of endocrine organs in the body as there are planets in the solar system. Is that a coincidence?
You said you have a book that describes this?
Yeah.
Is there a diagram? Do you have a diagram in there that visually shows this correlation between?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Maybe we can.
I could grab a copy.
Well, maybe we can overlay that
later. Yeah.
Post-production, maybe.
Later.
If not, we can link to it.
Yeah.
Because it's online or in Amazon or something.
Yeah, I mean it's not a bestseller.
Well,
yet, but
sure, whatever.
But yeah, you can order it on online. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think this is a good first impression, first view of your ideas, and also a good first test of the first interview for Resonance Radio.
I want to thank Thomas Spellman, the podcaster here, for having me on this show. This has been a dream come true for me.
Nice. My pleasure. Good honor. And if this works out, if it seems like the quality is good enough, we'll post it. But if not, we might have this conversation over again.
Right. Yeah, there is that.
All right. Thanks, Keith.
Yeah. Thank you, Thomas. All right.